Welcome to your Life Spirit Podcast, episode 7. Today is November 25th, 2023. Today we're on the third component of CMARSPP'S. So that's what we're discussing today, which is the M is measured. So what in your long-term success, anything you're trying to achieve long-term, your expectations have to be measured, so measurable. Let's talk about measurement. Before measurement comes clarity. So that introspection of where you're currently at in the 5 components of your life sphere. So let's talk about measurement. Your first component would be spiritual. What are you doing to spiritually measure your progress, Kenny?
So for me, when I want to measure something or a component of my life, whether it's a part of my life sphere or any sort of trait in my life, I take an inventory of what I want to measure. So spiritually, I think about it comes down to who have I served or how have I served God today or this week or this month? What have I done? And most of the time it's a realization, oh man, I should be doing more. I could be doing more. But then I name off the things that I've actually done this month, which is, it's a pretty good list of things, but I always feel like I should be doing more. There's one mantra that I live by that I apply to pretty much every aspect of sphere, and that's you are never arrived, or you have never arrived to where you're like, okay, cool, I've arrived, I've made it, I've done it, and okay, cool, I'm comfortable, and I can just stay right here. If you have that mentality to where you've arrived, that's when your progress starts to dwindle off.
Starts to stagnate.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing I do to measure that or take an inventory of spiritual. Who have I served and what have I done so far to serve in that realm?
I like that. So spiritually, yeah, you look at what you're doing on a weekly basis. So this week we're studying in the Come Follow Me program at church. We're studying James. James?
Yeah.
Be doers of the word and not just hearers. So you have to take an action. So once you've heard the information, like we say in the intro of this podcast, you actually have to take an action. And so the actions, what you've done for that week, you can look at, and that's actually quantitative data that you can measure. It's measurable. You can say, okay, what have I done? And I like ministering. How the second greatest commandment is how to love your neighbor. Who are you helping lift up? And just around you and your family, friends, your neighbors in your neighborhood. So what are you doing? And that's why I love having a calling. So it gets you to stay consistent at serving others.
And having a calling or having an assignment, in other words, is something that you can actually measure too. So at church, I was assigned to teach, same thing, but to teach the 13 and 14-year-old youth on Sundays. And from when I started, I think I've been teaching them for about eight months now, since my son was born. And he's 8 months now. And I'm able to compare how my lessons are now compared to how they were when I first started. And I'm able to continue to take an inventory of that and what I actually need to improve on. And there's different meetings once in a while to be like, okay, what or how can we tailor our lessons more towards the youth? Because me personally, I like to get down the youth's level and to communicate with them in a way that they can hear me instead of just trying to preach at them or teach them the scriptures or stuff like that. I talk about their lives. I talk about personal experiences. And youth, 13, 14-year-olds, a lot of them been through a lot. So they have a lot to share and they're really smart too. So I learn from them, they learn from me. So like when you have an assignment like that, you're able to measure that. And I'm able to continue to build and improve based on the measurements that I'm able to read from what I've been doing.
Yeah. And so another thing that you could do spiritually to measure, I'm taking some notes here. So we don't normally read, we usually just flowing with this. So one of the things you can do is take an inventory of where you're at with your own personal prayers on a daily basis. So you can say, how are your prayers on a scale of 1 to 10? And that's something you can ask yourself. Are they sincere enough, long enough, frequent enough? Are they supported by obedience? And then do you listen for the answers after you finish speaking? And do you commune with the Lord instead of just talking to him? So those are some of the things you can do spiritually to help measure on a daily basis if these are the things that you're doing to be closer to God. And so right now we're talking about the spiritual on the spiritual component, and then you move on to the physical component, which measurable is pretty obvious how you measure success.
Is it drinking chicken breasts?
He's
What?
got bro,
Drinking
he's over here reading all my notes over here.
Drinking chicken breast, bro. That's pretty physical right there. We were talking about that the other day, like why that is pretty pretty important to you because it's just an easier way to get protein down. And it's funny because everybody has their own physical components and physical ways that they look at things.
Before you go any further, bro, it's not drinking a chicken breast. It's you're eating it like soup. So if you warm it up, it's like chicken soup. But if you blend up the chicken breast, it's just easier to consume, and it's just easier to drink it out of the bowl.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I'm
anyways,
totally gonna try that. I love chicken soup, man. Chicken noodle soup at that. And able to and a way to track yourself physically. That's one of the easiest things for me personally because I've been tracking my macros. Let's see here. I'm going to my macro app right now. I'm pulling it up and it has a streak here for 366 days. I've been tracking my macros for 366 days. Macros are a total accounting for your intake of calories. So your protein, your carbs, and the fat that you eat every day, and it equals your total amount of protein. I'm sorry, not protein. It equals your total amount of calories. And by being able to track and measure my macros, I'm able to get leaner and hit goals quicker. Because if you don't know what you're eating on the law of thermodynamics, calories in, calorie out.
right.
And if you want to maintain, make sure you're not eating more calories in than you're already expending them. And that's just one way I've been tracking. I do it every day religiously, and tracking your gym, you're tracking your cardio or anything physical, what you're eating, how you're eating it, just physical stuff. Like maybe even how you're walking, how's your injury doing? How's your foot? How's your joints? Anything like that. How's your sleep? How's your neck? We're getting old. I'm 29, I'm getting 30 now, since I'm hitting my 30s soon. And I have a crick in my neck sometimes or your back. Like, how's that doing? What can I do to improve that? Just always having a good relationship with yourself to be able to track and measure your physical well-being.
So what's interesting about this component is it comes after it's spiritual. And so one of the things before we wanted to talk about how God's involved and connected in each component of your life sphere. If you recognize one of the things we didn't mention, which is huge about spiritual, is repentance and accepting and recognizing you're not perfect. And once you recognize that's the foundation of who you are, then you move into this physical component of your life. You recognize that you'll never necessarily be perfect physically, and not necessarily in this life, but you recognize that you're loved as spirit daughter or son of God. And once you have that, so you recognize you already have that happiness. And so you're not looking for that happiness in the other components of your life. That's the foundation of your life, is a spiritual component. The other thing I want to mention real quick is recognizing that the two things that are happening neurologically and physiologically within your body, when you're measuring, you're actually making measurable progress and incremental progress, and you're measuring that. What's happening is dopamine is being released, and it's also happening through your neocortex. So that's a logical part of your brain, and that's what we need for that long-term success and long-term progress at anything that we're trying to succeed at.
And just a disclosure too, me and Patrick, we're Christian, we're LDS, but we realize that a lot of people that are listening to this might not be Christian or LDS, or it may be we just going down a total different path. But when it comes to spiritual, we are preaching spirituality, period, point blank, when it comes to long-term fulfillment. And there's different ways to track your spirituality and how you're actually doing with yourself. I actually have a good friend of mine I was talking to today. He's a very spiritual person. And I think he used to be LDS a while ago, but he went more down like a spiritual oneness journey. And it's great. It's working for him. And I'm able to just ask him like how he does with himself spiritually, and he's able to give me good advice. And it all kind of ties in, but spiritual is just a foundational component to where, because we are spirit beings. If we're in tune with ourselves spiritually and in tune with God or a higher power, and know that that there's something larger than us, that we abide by those good laws of nature, of just fulfillment and just being the best person we possibly can. That's where fulfillment ties into. That's what I truly believe. Let's see here, but I think Patrick, did you say you had somebody you wanted to talk about as well?
Oh yeah. Also, I wanted to mention that the next component is accountability, how it's directly connected to accountability.
Yeah.
Whatever you're measuring, you have to return a report. I did want to mention how football and faith have come together for the University of Michigan linemen. Today, we want to talk about how football and faith have come together for the University of Michigan lineman. His name is Andrew Gentry, number 75 of the Michigan Wolverines. He's in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And so one of the things we want to talk about is how he's integrated the physical component of his life along with his spiritual component of his life, just the first two components of your life sphere. So one of the things he's done is he's not only become super successful in his physical component as a offensive lineman, but he's been serving. He's 6'7", 327 pounds.
Dang, massive.
So one of the things that he's done is he's served as a missionary in Argentina, and serving as a missionary in Argentina, he forewent some opportunities to play.
Yeah, and I really like the example that this fellow Andrew Gentry has set when it comes to tying in like your physical and your spiritual, because he's pretty vocal about his faith, and that's something I feel like I need to do better at, just being more vocal about just spirituality in general, because that's a sensitive topic a little bit. But when it comes back and circling back to measuring your life, measuring your life sphere, measuring different aspects of your life, or measuring goals, I was able to Google if you just go and Google like why measuring your goals are important. What Google says, it says it's important to have measurable goals so that you can track your progress and stay motivated. Like Patrick said, that when you track or you measure your goals, measure your progress, your brain releases dopamine, and it actually gives you a feeling of fulfillment, feeling of motivation. When it talks about that word motivation, it talks about the way that you're feeling, and motivation is a good accelerator, and it actually helps you continue to keep going. And it says also assessing progress helps you stay focused, meet your deadlines, and feel the excitement. See, another feeling there, another emotion, excitement, motivation, excitement of getting closer to your achieved goal. So that's something I really love when it talks about measuring, and measuring also goes right into the psychological part. And for psychological, I like to take a measurement and, okay, how am I feeling today? Am I feeling tired? Why am I tired? Like today, for instance, like I'm super tired today. And I know exactly why I'm tired today. And it's because my son was up a few times last night, and I'm on an athlete kind of sleep regimen to where like I need at least 7.5 hours of sleep to be able to function properly because of how much calories I burn, how much I work out. And if I get about 6.5, that's gives me a bit of a hard day the next day. So that's for me. And then for another psychological thing I tend to measure is, am I feeling happy? Am I stressed out? Why am I stressed out? What do I need to do to overcome this stress? How long is the stress going to last? Is there anything I could do to accelerate that stress? Anything I could do to alleviate it? So everybody struggles with different things psychologically, but I'm able to take an inventory on that almost daily.
And that's one of the reasons why you want to keep a calendar, whether you're using an app. I know you like to use apps, a physical or digital calendar, but a journaling way of reporting to yourself and others. Keep an audio journal, keep a digital or just a physical journal, but a means of that. That's a reflection of where you're at. It also helps because a lot of times what we perceive to be our reality is based upon our feelings. So we may think that the world, our situation, we're in a bad situation or things are difficult. But when you start to go through your journal and start to see the progress that you've made, that you've come a long ways, and you can actually see your physical progress. Some of the notes I have here are you're using that's where you get the limbic brain system, and you're actually you're actually getting dopamine, releases of dopamine. So you feel good when you see your progress. You can actually see whether you're putting an X on the wall every time you do something physical, whether you're exercising or spiritually, whether you're serving others on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. So that's the other thing it comes down to is your dailies, weeklies, and monthlies, and tracking the progress that you're making. And without that, you're basing your life off of your feelings, and your feelings aren't necessarily the reality, because what you perceive as your reality are based upon your emotions, and your emotions perceive what becomes your reality. So that's why it's good to have a logical means of measuring where you're at.
Yeah, and we talk about getting uncomfortable too. So something I like to do, which I actually don't like to do it because it sucks, but to track your or measure your progress is either taking pictures of yourself, taking a video of yourself, or
Yeah.
recording yourself vocally. And it's funny because I'm doing all of that most of the time. So like in golf, for instance, like I'm tracking and I'm constantly measuring my score every time I play. I have my buddies take videos of my swing. I have instruction, and I have my swing critiqued pretty often to where I'm able to improve on it. I'm like, all right, cool. Now my ball's going straighter. My distance is getting further. That's more of a physical aspect of measuring your progress. Recording yourself, whether if you're in like sales or whether if you're in a role where you have to talk to people quite often, like recording yourself either vocally or on camera. Or for instance, if you want to get leaner, taking progress pictures every week. That's something I do. I've been doing that monthly for a year, and I'm doing it weekly because I'm actually trying to get everything kind of fine tuned and look a certain way and all that stuff. So it's a weekly thing that I'm doing.
Yeah.
It sucks taking pictures of yourself and looking at yourself. It just makes you uncomfortable. But do it though.
Creates clarity.
Yeah.
Creates clarity. I like that. I like that. And I'm going to do that more often. You heard me say this before, and I'll say it again. You can't manage what you can't measure. So measuring is not only helpful for yourself, but for that accountability that comes next in your CMARSPP'S, you're able to show your logical progress. You're talking about the pictures that you're taking. You're able to see a logical incremental gains.
Dude,
No pun intended.
when it talks about yeah, right, incremental gains, when it talks about measure and the next aspect we mentioned it a couple of times is accountability, and that's so important. I'm super happy we're going to talk about the next podcast, which is accountability. When I'm taking pictures of myself weekly, do you think I just did that for myself? Nah, man. No, I told you I don't like taking pictures of myself. That sucks. I like taking pictures of myself monthly because I'm able to see more of a dramatic change, not like a whole drastic change, but I can see the progress. Sometimes I'm like, do I look different? Whatever. I'll wait till next month. But weekly, my coach, I send these pictures to my coach every single week. Talk about accountability. Yeah, it wasn't my idea to take pictures of myself for a week. It was his. I'm on the program right now. So accountability and measurement is like what Patrick was saying. When you measure something, moves right into the next topic or the next principle, which is accountability. And we'll dive deeper into that in the next podcast. But the next thing we want to discuss is how to measure your relationships or how to measure your resources. So measuring relationships. Let's see here. I'm trying to think. Measuring relationships.
Before we move on, I want to mention something.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Bro. Go
So
ahead.
I want to mention real quick that once again, the measuring comes down to the expectations. I don't know if you remember one of the first podcasts we did, I mentioned that your life is a rhythm, and your rhythm, you have a spiritual rhythm, a physical rhythm. In other words, that's a rhythm that you set, and it's the song that you're playing to yourself, the story you tell yourself on a regular basis. That's who you believe you are, and that's who you perceive you are, and that's who you'll always be. And as a means of measuring, remembering who you are, why you're here, and what you want, and you get that release of dopamine. And you want to talk about relationships?
Yeah, man, that was a gem right there. I appreciate it. So and it actually gave me time to think because I was like, oh, okay, what do I say here? How do I measure my relationships? One main thing I do to take an inventory of my relationships is who in my life right now is like upset with me or looks at me a certain way, or did I do anybody wrong or anything like that? Most of the time it's everybody's fine. Sometimes because I'm in business and I have to make decisions people aren't typically comfortable with, or have to make changes here and there and stuff like that. So if I have anything like that, I always do my best to make things right. And at 98% of the time, everybody in my life is pretty happy with me. And if they're not, it makes me very uncomfortable. And I need to make sure things are right. Because sometimes I'm a very outspoken person. I keep it pretty blunt with people. Like, I don't really act before I think things over, but sometimes I do. And then I'm like, okay, so to sit well with somebody, might have said something to make somebody upset, but I always make sure I hash those out. And I have, like I said before, I don't have too many super, super close friends of mine, but I do have a lot of business colleagues and associates. And I got to make sure these relationships are always on point. And sometimes I got to fix some stuff. I made a decision or I said something, or I'm just like, I got to make sure that's on point. But my biggest thing in my life when it comes to relationships are the way people perceive me is a solid individual, and I don't have any bad blood out there, period, point blank, at all. So if that's always like a positive in my life, I am solid, man. But when it comes to getting new people and getting a bigger network, that kind of falls more in my resources, which is the next one. But for you, how do you measure your relationships?
Bro, one of the things I want to talk about let's talk about the second greatest commandment, which is loving your neighbor. Let's talk about one of the things that we've had as an experience is being at the gym and having misunderstandings, let's call them, with people and using equipment or whatever. Sometimes people mistake you for someone else, whatever. Some things can happen. And both Kenny and I have had experiences where we've had to recognize who we are, why we're here, and what we want real quick. Right?
And it makes somebody reckon.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Now you have to put off the natural man and you have to recognize that they're a child of God too. And they're doing what they thought was right. And so you have to put yourself in their shoes. And so there comes that space between stimulus and response. And there's that ability that God gives us to make a decision. And that's like our God-given ability to make a decision and a choice. We're not animals. We don't just instinctively react, and we don't have the ability to respond. So
share one of those experiences, bro.
Oh, at the gym?
Yeah.
So let me see if I even remember this experience.
I have an experience I could share too.
Because I forgot about it, but I think I've had a couple different experiences. But I think the one you're referring to was over here at Voss, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I had my stuff right next to, and it just comes down to gym etiquette, but right? Who's the gym etiquette police? Not me. So that's the last thing I want to be. Anyways. And so I had my things there waiting for the equipment, and gym etiquette is that you're next in line, and someone else came over from the other side of the room and said that they were waiting for the equipment as soon as I was about to jump on. And so this kid, he's probably 19, 20 years old. And so he got upset. I got upset, but then I recognized real quick that's not what Christ would do. And I recognized who I am, why I'm here, and what I want. And so I responded rather than reacting. I didn't feel good. I didn't feel like I could say that I love him as my neighbor. I don't know if I could say that. So I said, you know what? I need to make things right with this kid. So walked over, apologized to him for getting upset, because I did raise my voice to him. So, and you know what? Made me feel a lot better. We squashed things and everything was cool. He even apologized. And so the world is a better place, in my opinion. Things could have gone other ways real quick. So they could have escalated real quick.
Yeah, but I have a similar experience. I'm not going to go into details, but I was working out with my wife. This at the same gym. This is way earlier in the year. The guy irritated me. I was just talking trash to him, and then he talked trash to me, blah, blah, blah. And I talked trash to him, and then I left. And then I was like, I was doing cardio. And I'm like, dude, man, I just went to the temple this morning. Okay, I have to go. And I actually found the guy, and I apologized to him. But you want to know something interesting? This guy, I've never seen this guy before in my life, bro. Ever. This guy knew exactly who I was. He's like, is your name Kenny? I'm like, yeah, bro, what the heck? He's, oh, yeah, I know your mother-in-law, Vilma, or whatever. Dude, he was a missionary in her ward back in California.
Oh, gee.
He knew exactly who I was. Dude, if I would never went, if I would never went and apologized to him, made things right and all that stuff, we got to bro it down a little bit, talk about relationships and talk about having people out there looking at me a certain way. Cause he and my mother-in-law are friends on Facebook, and he sees pictures of me that she posts. So that's how he knew exactly who I was. So I would have never, ever known. He probably just been like, man, just forever. This guy's that guy's a douchebag. Every time he sees a picture she posts of me. So that was crazy. So it's always make things right with people. You don't ever want to have people out there looking at you a certain way or looking at you like you're an a-hole or you're not a good person or something like that. Unless you're in traffic, then they don't even know what you look like.
It's a small world, bro. And it's easier
Yeah,
when
small
you
world.
make friends with your neighbors rather than enemies.
Oh, yeah.
It just makes life a lot easier for everyone. So it's cool how Christ said do that such a long time ago, a couple thousand years ago, and still applicable today. So that was relationships, and then resources,
Measuring that, measuring
measuring
your resources.
So that's pretty logical right here. My neighbor he's an accountant. It's pretty easy measuring your success when it comes to financial success, resources, and accumulating those assets and those sorts of things. What's another ways of measuring your progress when it comes to your resources, Kenny?
So then, like I said earlier, when it comes tied it into relationships, like how solid and healthy are my relationships, small and big, and then new relationships that I am trying to make or need to make. And I'm like, okay, I tie that into or relate that to my resources because in my line of work, like networking, connecting, building out a bigger network of business, that is a resource that I need to be more successful. So monthly or weekly, I'm like, okay, cool. I have a goal to recruit X amount of people or X amount of teams for my company. And how far away am I from doing that? Or I have a goal of reaching a certain amount of deals per month or per year or XYZ. Where am I at and how am I setting myself up for success when it comes to hitting that goal? And that's something I constantly measure. If you're just living day by day, just okay, cool. Eventually I want to do this much or make this much and you're not measuring anything, dude, like you're just like, I don't know. That's my line of work. So if you work a 9 to 5 and if you want to hit a certain position, how am I going to get there? What's the next steps? How am I currently doing? How am I performing compared to everybody else in my company in my current role? And why am I a good choice for that role? How long will it take me? Always measuring yourself when it comes to your resources. Me too. I also like to measure like either credit or actual income, finances, all that stuff. But when it comes to just measuring your resources, break it down to how are you going to get that goal? Get a vision board, all that stuff. Psychological is like me feeling tired today. I'm tired or all that stuff. But
The
I
other
mean,
thing about psychological
large spectrum, man.
is your
Mhm.
secular education.
Yeah. Secular education. That's something I haven't really even thought of. Secular education.
And the church is really big on that when it comes to education. The church's Pathways program, BYU Pathways programs now worldwide. That's really cool. I have some friends for my mission that have gone through the program as well. And that's another means of measuring your progress psychologically.
Oh,
Yeah. So
should always be learning.
Yeah.
I'm always learning, but I'm like, wow, whatever I learned. Yeah, that's a really good point, man. Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
And I truly believe that experience is the best teacher. So it's one of the reasons why we're doing this podcast. So doing it, not just we're doers of the word, not just hearers, right?
Oh yeah, 100%, man. We do everything we're talking about. That's why I'm super excited to go into the next topic, our next podcast, which is accountability. Make sure you tune in next week. Can't find any of this stuff anywhere else. And if you have questions, hit us up.